Well, hi there. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the first practice set involving factor markets. So let's get started. First, this says, does this scenario change the factor supply, the factor demand, or not shift? And so this is going to be a little bit tough because some of them might actually be a product demand shifting, but it's going to cause the demand for factors to shift and vice versa. It's going to be a little bit tricky. Just remember, we're focused on the factor side of things. So the product becomes more popular among the consumers. That's going to cause the price of the product to rise. As a result of the price of the product rising, we know that marginal revenue product would rise, and so demand would increase. Workers begin to prefer much more leisure time. Well, that's going to cause fewer workers regardless of what the wage was, so that's going to decrease the factor supply of labor. Workers become much less productive. Maybe they're sitting around at home, working from home. I'm not sure, right? My students, right? We'll see. No, I'm just kidding. Workers become much less productive, so the marginal product per worker falls. That means the marginal revenue product of each worker is going to decrease. So we would say change in demand, decrease. Wages for workers rise quickly. So this is a red herring. It's a trick question, right? Remember, the price doesn't shift the curve. Price doesn't shift the curve. Now, you're going to say to me, but Gloss, the first one, you said the price did change, but this is the price of the factor itself. The wage of the worker is not going to change the supply of the workers. Higher wages would lead to a greater quantity supplied, and that is a different concept. So we would say no change, only a change in quantity supplied. More immigration visas are issued to foreign workers. Well, that's obviously going to change the supply of workers, and it's going to increase that supply. Now let's take this practice problem. This is an AP exam problem from a few years ago. Hatco sells hats in a perfectly competitive market at a price of $2 a hat. So I'm going to underline that. Assume labor is the only variable input and the wage is $15. Table below shows Hatco's production function in the short run for hats, 0 through 6, and output. So this is our total product here. So we don't have the marginal products here. But we could calculate them by finding what's the change. So in order to do this, we actually are going to have to calculate what these marginal products are. I'm reading the very first one. It says, after which worker do diminishing marginal returns begin? So the first worker, the marginal product is 10. The second worker, the marginal product is 16. The third is 10. And so after which worker? After the second worker is where we would say that happens, because the second worker is bigger than the first, but the third worker is less than the second, so after the second one. And if we had to explain that, we could just say because 10 is less than 16. And this 10 in that answer is referring not to the first one, but to the third one. Calculate the marginal physical product of the fifth worker. Now, sometimes students get hung up on physical here. All that means is what's the additional output per worker. So the fifth worker generates 5 units. And if we needed to calculate, we could say for 5 equals 49 plus 44. Calculate the marginal revenue product of the third worker. Well, we already know the physical product was 10. So 10 times, what's the price? $2. So that worker made 10 hats at $2 a piece. So that worker was worth $20 to the company. How many workers will they hire to maximize profit? Well, in order to do that, we have to remember the wage rate is 15. So they're definitely going to hire that third worker because they're generating $20 and they only have to pay them 15. The fourth worker generates 8 units. And so 8 times 2 is 16. So they would also hire the fourth worker, but they would not hire that fifth worker who only generated 5 units. And that's because the fifth worker is only worth $10 to the company. They would end up having to pay them 15. So we would say quantity of labor 4 because the MRP of that fourth worker was $16, and that's greater than the marginal factor cost of that worker, which was $15. And if we were kind of being really full in our explanation, we would say, and not the fifth worker, because the fifth worker only generated $10 and they would cost us 15. If they have fixed costs equal to $20, what will be their profit if they hire 2 workers? So this is just saying, okay, do the math. How much would they be earning? We know that profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost. Well, total revenue here from 2 workers, we have 26 units at $2 a piece. So $2 times 26, and then we're going to subtract the total cost. Now, it says total cost, so fixed is 20, right? So minus the $20, and then we're also going to add the variable cost. And the variable cost is coming from these 2 workers. They're the only variable input. The 2 workers are $15 a piece, so that's $30. And so we have equals 52 minus 50 So they're making $2 of economic profit if they hire 2 workers. If the price of hats goes up, what will happen to the number of workers hired? Explain. Well, if the price of hats goes up, if price increases, we can say, therefore, the MRP of each labor increases, and therefore the demand increases. And so, therefore, right, more labor hired, because each worker is more valuable to the company because the MRP is higher. Now, the last problem doesn't have anything to do with hats. Suppose the cost of capital is 300, wages are 200, marginal product of last worker is 12, marginal product of last unit of capital is 8, using numbers to explain why this firm doesn't have the correct combination and how they should reallocate. So we know we're looking for MPK, the marginal product of capital, divided by the rent to equal the marginal product of labor divided by the wage, but we're also being told that these are not equal values. And so let's test and see which one's bigger. We would want to hire more of the thing that gives us more product per dollar. So the marginal cost of capital is 300. The wage rates are 200. The product of the last worker is 1,200. And the product of the last capital is 800. And so we have 8/3, which is 2 2/3. And then we have 6. So which one's bigger? Well, 6 is clearly bigger. So we should hire more labor and less capital, because 6 is bigger than 2 2/3. So hopefully this helped you with going through the basics of factor markets. I'll see you next time.